There are moments in life when opposition rises without warning, when whispers turn into resistance, and unseen battles begin to press against your destiny. In those moments, it is easy to feel overwhelmed, confused, or even tempted to fight back in the flesh. But there is a higher law at work, a spiritual principle that governs victory beyond noise, arguments, and revenge. What if the very forces working against you are already positioned to expose themselves? What if the pressure you feel is not meant to break you, but to force the truth to the surface? There is a realm where silence speaks louder than accusation, where obedience carries more power than confrontation. When you respond correctly, God himself becomes your defender. And what was done in secret begins to cry out openly. The hands that try to bury your name will soon struggle to explain their own actions. This is not about manipulation or retaliation. It is about alignment with divine order. When you return matters back to God, using spiritual wisdom rather than emotional reactions, time becomes your ally and truth accelerates. What you do next determines whether the battle drags on or ends swiftly. This message is about positioning yourself so that within days, not years, the opposition collapses under the weight of its own deception. Unseen battles often begin long before we realize we are in them. They do not announce themselves with noise or open confrontation, but operate quietly in intentions, conversations, and decisions made behind closed doors. Many people assume that if there is no visible conflict, then there is no opposition. Yet some of the most intense warfare happens in silence. These hidden struggles manifest as unexplained resistance, sudden misunderstanding, delayed progress, or a strange heaviness that seems to follow every step forward. What feels like coincidence is often coordination. And what appears random may be the result of deliberate spiritual or emotional positioning by unseen adversaries. Hidden enemies rarely attack directly because their strength depends on secrecy. They rely on confusion, misinformation, and subtle manipulation, working through systems, relationships, and environments rather than open hostility. Their goal is not always to destroy immediately, but to weaken confidence, distort perception, and gradually shift outcomes. This is why discernment is critical. Without awareness, a person may fight the wrong battles, confront the wrong people, or exhaust themselves responding to symptoms instead of sources. The true conflict is often deeper than the surface disagreement or visible obstacle. Unseen battles also reveal themselves through patterns. When the same obstacle reappears in different forms, when doors close repeatedly without clear reason, or when support turns into resistance without explanation, these are indicators that something beneath the surface is at work. Hidden opposition often hides behind familiarity, sometimes even wearing the face of support. This makes it dangerous because familiarity lowers suspicion. What seems harmless can quietly influence decisions, delay growth, or redirect purpose without ever showing open hostility. Pressure is one of the main tools used in unseen battles. When resistance increases at critical moments, especially just before breakthroughs, it is rarely accidental. Opposition intensifies when progress threatens hidden agendas. This is why many people experience the greatest pushback right before elevation. The enemy does not fight what poses no threat. Resistance is often a signal that something valuable is close. That movement in the right direction has triggered an invisible response. These unseen conflicts are not always external. Sometimes they operate through internal voices of doubt, fear, and hesitation, amplified by external circumstances. Hidden enemies understand that if they can influence thoughts, they can control actions. A discouraged mind is easier to steer than a determined one. This is why battles of confidence, identity, and purpose feel so intense even when there is no visible opponent. The fight is happening in realms that are not immediately visible, but deeply impactful. Revelation is the turning point in unseen battles. What remains hidden cannot be addressed, but what is exposed loses power. Over time, pressure forces truth to surface. Hidden intentions cannot remain concealed forever because inconsistency eventually reveals itself. Words contradict actions. Motives leak through behavior. And alliances shift under stress. When light enters, confusion begins to clear. And what once felt mysterious starts to make sense. The revealing of hidden enemies is often uncomfortable because it disrupts assumptions and challenges trust. It forces reevaluation of relationships, environments, and even personal decisions. Yet, this revelation is not meant to produce fear, but clarity. Awareness restores control. Once the true nature of the battle is understood, responses become strategic rather than emotional. Energy is conserved, focus sharpens, and movement becomes intentional. Unseen battles ultimately test discernment more than strength. Victory does not come from reacting faster, but from seeing clearer. Those who learn to recognize hidden opposition early avoid unnecessary struggles and prolonged delays. When awareness increases, manipulation loses its grip, confusion dissolves, and the battle shifts from survival to mastery. Hidden enemies depend on darkness, and once exposure begins, their influence weakens, their strategies unravel, and their ability to operate quietly begins to collapse. Silence is often misunderstood as weakness, avoidance, or fear, yet in many battles it is the highest form of wisdom. Those who speak too quickly reveal their position, their emotions, and sometimes their strategy. Silence, on the other hand, preserves strength. It creates space for observation, discernment, and timing. When opposition expects reaction and receives restraint, instead, the balance of power quietly shifts. Silence interrupts manipulation because manipulators rely on emotional responses to maintain control. Wisdom understands that not every accusation deserves an answer, and not every provocation requires a defense. Speaking prematurely can entangle a person in unnecessary conflict, drain emotional energy, and expose intentions that should remain guarded. Silence allows truth to mature. Lies need noise to survive, but truth does not. When a person refuses to engage in unproductive exchanges, false narratives are forced to stand on their own. And without reinforcement, they begin to collapse under scrutiny. Silence also functions as a mirror. When you stop explaining yourself, people reveal more about themselves. In the absence of your reaction, their motives, insecurities, and intentions surface through their continued actions and words. Those who are sincere will pause and reflect, while those operate from hidden agendas will grow restless, louder, and more aggressive. This contrast exposes character without you needing to accuse or confront. Observation becomes clearer when emotion is removed from the exchange. There is authority in restraint. Silence communicates confidence without words. It signals that you are not desperate for validation or approval. When you do not rush to defend yourself, you demonstrate trust in truth, timing, and higher justice. This posture unsettles opposition because it denies them the satisfaction of control. They expect panic, anger, or justification, but instead encounter calm. Calm disrupts their strategy because it refuses to play the assigned role. Silence also protects vision. Every destiny requires seasons of guardedness, where ideas, plans, and intentions are shielded from unnecessary exposure. Not everyone who asks questions is entitled to answers. Silence allows plans to mature without interference, sabotage, or premature criticism. What is spoken too early can be attacked before it is strong enough to stand. Wisdom knows when to speak and when to withhold, understanding that timing often determines impact. Emotion-driven speech often escalates conflict, while silence de-escalates without surrender. It allows space for perspective to return. Many regrets are born from words spoken in moments of pressure. Silence creates a pause. And within that pause lies power. Power to choose a better response. Power to avoid traps disguised as conversations. Power to remain aligned with purpose rather than ego. Silence does not mean passivity. It is active restraint, guided by discernment. While the mouth is quiet, the mind is alert, the spirit attentive, and strategy forming. Silence sharpens listening. It allows subtle details to emerge, patterns to become visible, and inconsistencies to reveal themselves. In quiet observation, wisdom gathers information that noise would have drowned out. There are moments when speaking feels urgent, when the desire to clarify, correct, or confront becomes intense. Yet wisdom asks whether the moment demands expression or endurance. Silence in such moments is not denial of truth, but trust in its eventual emergence. Truth does not require constant defense. It has its own momentum. When allowed time, it surfaces naturally, often more powerfully than forced explanation. Those who master silence learn that not every battle is won with words. Some victories are secured by refusing to engage on the wrong level. Silence shifts the battlefield. It moves the conflict away from emotional reaction into the realm of observation, patience, and higher judgment. When words are withheld, confusion clears, motives unravel, and wisdom quietly takes its place as the guiding force behind every next move. When God becomes the defender, the nature of the battle changes completely. Human defense is limited by emotion, information, and strength. But divine defense operates beyond visibility and timing. Many people exhaust themselves trying to explain, justify, or protect their reputation, not realizing that self-defense often keeps them trapped in the conflict. The moment a person releases the need to fight back and entrusts the matter to God, a higher authority steps into the situation. This shift is not passive surrender, but intentional alignment with a power that sees every motive, hears every hidden conversation, and understands every unseen strategy. God defends in ways that human effort cannot replicate. While people focus on immediate outcomes, divine defense addresses root causes. It rearranges circumstances, exposes truth, and redirects outcomes without noise. What looks like delay is often preparation, and what feels like silence is strategic positioning. God does not rush to respond in human time, but when he moves, the impact is comprehensive. He does not merely stop an attack. He dismantles the system that produced it. Trusting God as the defender requires releasing control, and this is often the most difficult part. The desire to manage perception, correct narratives, and control outcomes feels natural, yet it often interferes with divine intervention. God defends best when human interference is minimal. When a person stops trying to prove themselves, God begins to reveal truth in ways that cannot be contested. Accusations lose credibility when facts emerge independently, without force or argument. Divine defense also protects from unnecessary exposure. When people defend themselves, they often reveal more than intended, sometimes weakening their own position. God defends without exposing vulnerabilities. He covers while correcting, shields while revealing, and restores while confronting. His defense preserves dignity even in the process of exposure. What he allows to be revealed is precise, purposeful, and controlled. Another dimension of divine defense is timing. God understands when exposure will produce repentance, when it will bring justice, and when it will create alignment. Premature exposure can harden hearts or escalate conflict, but delayed exposure can allow truth to mature until it speaks for itself. God defends not just by stopping harm, but by ensuring that the outcome leads to lasting resolution rather than temporary relief. When God defends, Opposition often defeats itself. Those who operate with hidden motives eventually overextend, contradict themselves, or reveal inconsistencies under pressure. Without resistance from you, their actions become more visible. God allows space for their strategies to unfold just enough for their true nature to be exposed. What they intended to use as a weapon becomes evidence against them. Divine defense also preserves inner peace. While external circumstances may still be unfolding, the internal atmosphere changes immediately. Anxiety decreases, clarity increases, and confidence replaces desperation. This inner stability is a sign that the burden has been transferred. When God carries the weight of the battle, the soul is no longer crushed by it. Peace becomes both protection and confirmation. God's defense is comprehensive. It extends beyond the immediate conflict into future protection. He not only resolves the current issue, but adjusts paths, removes hidden threats, and repositions people to avoid similar battles. What could have become a cycle of repeated conflict is interrupted. The lesson is learned, discernment is sharpened, and future opposition loses access. Relying on God as the defender reshapes identity. A person no longer defines themselves by accusations or resistance, but by divine affirmation. Confidence shifts from public opinion to spiritual assurance. When identity is anchored in God's defense, external attacks lose their power to define or derail purpose. The battle becomes less about survival and more about alignment with a greater plan that continues to unfold beyond human interference, returning the matter to divine order. Begins with recognizing the limits of human control. Many conflicts intensify not because the opposition is strong, but because the response is misaligned. When people attempt to resolve spiritual or deeply rooted issues through emotional reactions, force, or manipulation, they often create more disorder. Divine order operates on principles that transcend impulse. It requires trust, restraint, and alignment with higher wisdom rather than immediate gratification. To return a matter to divine order is to step out of chaos and re-enter a system governed by purpose, justice, and clarity. Disorder thrives where impatience rules. The urge to respond immediately, to correct every misunderstanding, or to defend against every attack pulls situations further away from resolution. Divine order invites patience, not as delay, but as positioning. When a matter is placed back into God's hands, timing becomes intentional. Events begin to unfold in sequences that expose truth rather than conceal it. What once felt confusing starts to organize itself around clarity. Returning the matter also involves releasing personal agendas. Human involvement is often driven by pride, fear, or the need for validation. These motives distort judgment and cloud discernment. Divine order requires surrender of these inner pressures. It is not about losing influence, but about transferring authority. When God governs a matter, outcomes are no longer shaped by emotional volatility, but by righteousness and truth. Alignment with divine order changes the way information is processed. Instead of reacting to every report, rumor, or accusation, a person begins to filter events through wisdom. Not everything requires a response, and not every signal deserves attention. Divine order simplifies complexity. It removes unnecessary noise and highlights what truly matters. This clarity prevents distraction and preserves focus. There is also a recalibration of responsibility. In divine order, each party is held accountable for their role without force or accusation. God's system does not require you to expose everyone or correct every injustice personally. He assigns responsibility accurately. Those who sow confusion eventually confront the consequences of their actions, while those who remain aligned experience preservation. Justice in divine order is precise, not reckless. Returning the matter to divine order often feels like stepping back, but in reality it is stepping higher. From this elevated perspective, patterns become visible. Repeated behaviors, hidden motives, and strategic resistance can be discerned without emotional involvement. This perspective reduces vulnerability. When you are no longer emotionally entangled, manipulation loses its power. Divine order also restores internal alignment. Many external conflicts are intensified by internal disorder. Anxiety, fear, and resentment create openings for poor decisions. When a matter is returned to God, the inner environment begins to stabilize. Peace replaces urgency, and confidence replaces desperation. This inner shift affects external outcomes more than force ever could. There is a refining process involved in returning matters to divine order. It exposes areas where control was mistaken for responsibility and where reaction replaced wisdom. This refinement strengthens character and sharpens discernment. Future challenges are met with greater clarity because the lesson of alignment has been learned. Divine order ensures that outcomes serve purpose, not ego. Victory is not just about being proven right, but about being positioned correctly. Sometimes this means separation from environments, relationships, or systems that thrive on disorder. God's order rearranges access. Some doors close not as punishment, but as protection. When matters are governed by divine order, resolution does not rely on confrontation. Truth emerges organically. Systems adjust. People reveal themselves through consistency or contradiction. What once required effort now unfolds with precision. The weight lifts, clarity increases, and the path forward becomes evident. Without striving, truth has a unique relationship with pressure. While deception depends on comfort and control, truth has the capacity to endure tension without distortion. When pressure is applied to a situation, hidden realities begin to surface naturally. What was carefully concealed under calm conditions struggles to remain hidden when circumstances tighten. This is why pressure often precedes revelation. It forces alignment, exposes inconsistencies, and brings clarity to what once appeared uncertain. Pressure removes the luxury of pretense. Under ease, people can maintain appearances, manage narratives, and sustain contradictions. Under pressure, these efforts become exhausting, begin to contradict actions. Stories shift, and behavior reveals what speech tried to hide. Truth does not need to be pushed aggressively. It emerges when falsehood can no longer maintain its structure. The weight of pressure causes deception to collapse inward. In moments of pressure, reactions become more honest. People respond instinctively rather than strategically. This instinctive response reveals values, priorities, and intentions. Those operating in truth remain consistent even when circumstances intensify, while those relying on manipulation become reactive, defensive, or erratic. Pressure acts as a filter, separating authenticity from performance. Pressure also clarifies relationships. Support that was conditional becomes visible when conditions change. Loyalty rooted in convenience fades, while genuine alignment remains steady. When pressure enters, it tests not only individuals but systems and alliances. What cannot withstand tension reveals its fragility. This exposure is not meant to harm but to inform. Awareness replaces assumption. There is a misconception that pressure is destructive by nature. In reality, pressure is a tool. Compresses, refines, and reveals. Just as heat purifies metals, pressure purifies truth. It burns away excess, leaving behind what is real and valuable. What survives pressure is worth trusting. What collapses under it was never stable to begin with. Truth surfacing under pressure often feels uncomfortable because it disrupts familiar narratives. It challenges beliefs that were built on incomplete information. Yet this discomfort is temporary, while the clarity it produces is lasting. Once truth is revealed, confusion loses its hold. Decisions become easier, boundaries clearer, and direction more defined. Pressure also exposes internal truths. It reveals fears, insecurities, and unresolved issues within the individual experiencing it. These internal revelations are as important as external ones. Pressure forces self-examination. It highlights where confidence is rooted, where trust is placed, and where growth is needed. This internal clarity strengthens resilience. When pressure is resisted emotionally, it intensifies. When it is endured with patience, it accomplishes its purpose. Pressure is not meant to be escaped prematurely but understood. It is a process that brings matters to the surface so they can be addressed properly. Avoiding pressure often delays revelation, while embracing it accelerates clarity. Truth emerging under pressure also changes power dynamics. Those who relied on secrecy lose leverage when exposure begins. Control shifts from manipulation to transparency. Once truth is visible, it no longer needs defense. It stands on its own. Accusations lose credibility and confusion dissolves. Pressure reveals timing. It shows when silence has served its purpose and when clarity is unavoidable. It forces decisions that were postponed and confrontations that were avoided. Yet these confrontations are no longer chaotic. They are informed. Pressure prepares the ground for truth to emerge in a way that is undeniable. When truth surfaces, it often does so through patterns rather than single events. Repeated behavior under pressure forms a clear picture. Over time, these patterns become impossible to ignore. What was once suspected becomes evident. What was hidden becomes visible without accusation or force. Pressure does not create truth, it reveals it. It removes coverings, strips illusions, and accelerates exposure. In its presence, reality rises to the surface, demanding acknowledgement and response.